You ever think you've finally escaped the madness? That maybe, just maybe, your luck's turned a corner and you'll get to have a little peace for once? That's where I was, standing on the weathered wooden porch of what I thought was my own private heaven, staring out at that quiet lake, listening to the wind tiptoe through the pines. No neighbors peeking over the fence, no cars droning past at all hours, and, this is important, no HOA, no rules. Nobody making you sign a stack of forms just to paint your mailbox or plant a daffodil too close to the curb. That's what I bought. That's what the listing said. That's what every paper in that folder the old couple handed me at closing screamed, in black and white. No HOA. Never had one, never would. I must have flipped through those documents half a dozen times, just letting the truth of it sink in. Deed, zoning approvals, old surveys, even a stack of yellowed photos showing the place as it changed through the decades. One summer in the late 80s when someone tried to grow tomatoes near the dock, a birthday party by the pool, the leaves turning gold behind the house. It felt like the last honest corner of the world. I didn't just want it. I needed it. After 15 years wrestling deadlines and personalities in aerospace contracts, dodging bosses who could turn on you like a dog with a thorn in its paw, always one missed email away from a nervous breakdown, I was bone tired. I wanted nothing but my books, my tools, the lake, maybe a glass of whiskey on the porch when the sky turned pink. So I moved in, quick as I could, not even bothering to unpack everything before I started making it mine. That fence out back sagged like it had been through a tornado. Hired a guy, big arms, sunburnt neck, who put in a new privacy fence so solid it looked like it'd outlast the house. I didn't want to shut the world out, at least not completely. I just liked knowing where my ground ended and someone else's began. Seemed fair. The pool, though, was something else. Hadn't been cleaned in a decade. The tiles were cracked, the water a kind of green you only see in science fiction. But you could see the bones were good, deep, wide, old school. The kind of pool that makes you think about summers when you were a kid, cannonballing till you scraped your knees. I wanted to fix it up. New tile lights, maybe even a little hot tub for the winter. Nothing fancy, just mine. For the first few weeks, life settled into the slow rhythm I'd been craving. I worked from home, took breaks by the water, finally opened those dusty books. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Even the wind sounded softer out here. And then, just as I started to believe that maybe the universe had decided to leave me alone for a while, I saw her. That's how these stories always start, right? You're finally at peace, then someone comes along to remind you how fragile it is. It was late afternoon, cicadas going nuts, sun melting through the trees, when I looked out back and saw what I thought was a bird perched on the new fence. But the bird moved in a way that didn't make sense. It had elbows. Stepping outside, I saw her. Blonde bob, pressed polo shirt tucked in with military precision, and a face that told you she'd never once lost a game of Monopoly. She was standing on a metal stepladder, the legs wobbling in the dirt, craning her neck over my brand-new fence like she was conducting a land survey for the government. In one hand, a laminated sheet of paper waved around like it was a search warrant. "Can I help you?" I called out, already feeling that old, familiar tension on my spine. She didn't even flinch like she got greeted that way every day. "Yes, I'm Karen Blake, president of the Silver Palm Estates HOA. I'm here because this pool is listed as a community amenity on the 2004 subdivision map." I blinked real slow. "What?" She gave the paper a dramatic flick, her voice all business. "Right here, Lot E, designated recreation space. This pool belongs to the community." I stood there shirtless, still dripping from a swim, towel over my shoulder, feeling like I just stepped into someone else's sitcom. "No," I said, keeping it calm. "This is a private lot. Not in your HOA. I've got the deed, I've got the survey, it's mine." She narrowed her eyes, like I'd insulted her dog. "Well," she said, stepping down from the ladder with all the care of someone descending a throne, "then I suggest you double-check. Because if that's the pool I think it is, you're not supposed to be the only one using it." She turned and marched off, the ladder creaking as she went, leaving me standing there in the dying light, wondering how in the hell peace could be so fragile. I thought it was over, a neighborhood misunderstanding. Maybe some bored retiree who'd watched too much Law and Order. But 2 days later, there's a letter on my doorstep. Not a flyer. Not a nice little welcome to the community card. No, this thing came certified, signature required, as official as jury duty. The return address? Silver Palm Estates, HOA, Office of the President. I stood in my kitchen, coffee in hand, and opened it with the kind of dread you feel before a dentist appointment. The tone of the letter was, how do I put this politely, smug as hell. According to President Karen Blake, the association had reviewed archival documents that, in their view, prove my swimming pool was a shared community asset, erroneously omitted from current HOA access. They demanded I restore open access to the community amenity and even included a schedule for neighborhood use, Tuesdays and Thursdays for water aerobics, weekends for family gatherings. I had 7 days to comply before they'd pursue formal measures. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then, just to make sure I hadn't fallen into an alternate reality, I read it again. Nope, still there. A community schedule for my pool. Took photos, sent them to my old friend Eric in Denver. He's an attorney, not the ambulance chaser kind, the nuke from orbit kind. He called me back inside 5 minutes, chuckling. You're not tied to that HOA, not even a little. They're bluffing. So I drafted a polite reply, attached copies of my deed and the county records, and dropped it in the mail that afternoon. Kept it civil, the way you do when you're dealing with people who might one day try to run you over with their golf cart. That weekend, my buddy Adam drove out from the city. He's a good man to have in your corner. Big laugh, bigger heart, not scared of a little neighborhood drama. We spent Saturday tinkering with the new LED pool lights, cracking a couple beers, just enjoying the kind of lazy day you think only happens in movies. We were stretched out on lounge chairs, feet propped up, music humming, when suddenly there's yelling from the other side of the fence. I look up, and it's Karen again. This time with 2 clipboard-wielding guys in matching polos, looking like they're about to conduct a census. She's shouting, "You are violating community usage policies. This is an HOA-registered amenity." Adam looked at me, eyebrow raised. "Is this normal out here?" I shrugged, apparently. One of the guys snapped a picture of us, muttering, "We're documenting noncompliance." Karen pointed at me like I'd just committed grand theft auto. "You need to vacate immediately. This is an ongoing violation." I reached for the speaker and turned the music up. Not loud enough to make it a war, just enough to drown out her voice. She kept it, though. At some point, one of her clipboard minions pulled out his phone and started making a call, loud enough for the whole block to hear. 20 minutes later, wouldn't you know it, red and blue lights flash at the end of my drive. Adam sets his beer down. "You gotta be kidding me." "Not even a little," I said, pulling on a shirt and heading out front because, apparently, relaxing in my own backyard now required a police escort. The 2 officers who showed up looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The younger one was all business, hand on his belt, eyes sharp. The older one, grayer, heavier, looked about as tired as a man could be and still be standing upright. I walked halfway down the drive to meet them, try to look as unthreatening as a guy in flip-flops can manage. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" the young one asked. "Yeah, Cole Maddox. This is my place." The older cop looked past me at the backyard, then over at the group on the other end of the street, Karen and her crew, huddled up like they were planning an invasion. "We received a call," the young cop said. "Possible disturbance, unauthorized use of community property, and aggressive behavior." I actually laughed. "Aggressive behavior?" He didn't laugh. "Yes, sir. You refused to vacate a community pool and were verbally confrontational." Instead of arguing, I pulled out my phone, tapped my security camera app, and handed it to the older cop. "Here's the footage," I said. More where that came from. The screen showed Karen and her squad yelling through my fence while Adam and I sat by the pool, barely even looking up. No threats. No trespassing. Just them, hollering into the void. The older cop watched for a moment, then handed the phone back. "You have ID? Date? Anything showing ownership?" I nodded, led them up to the porch, and laid out every document. Deed, zoning map, tax records, the works. They went through everything, the young cop's posture relaxing a notch with each page. "This all looks in order," he finally said. I try not to sound too smug. Turns out I'm not squatting in my own house. The older cop grunted, maybe a laugh, maybe just a sigh. She said you were hostile. You didn't threaten anyone. I shook my head. Didn't even talk to her. Just turned up the music and minded my business. If that's aggression, you'll need a lot more jails. They both cracked a smile at that, scribbled something on a form, and told me they'd have to make a report just because a call had been made. I offered to email the footage. He handed me a card. Might help. As they pulled away, I watched Karen's group scatter, but not before she gave me a glare cold enough to curdle milk. Adam handed me another beer, didn't even say a word. Didn't need to. We both knew that was just round one. Next morning, I'm barely out of bed, coffee mug in hand, slippers shuffling across the floor, when there's a knock on my door. Not a cop, thank God. Just a kid, maybe 16, eyes down, clutching a stack of flyers like they were radioactive. She thrusts one at me, barely meeting my gaze, and scurries off so fast I almost laugh. I stand there on the porch, reading it right there in the fresh air. Community alert. Reclamation of shared pool underway. Temporary inaccessibility due to hostile occupation by non-HOA resident. Join us in demanding the restoration of Silver Palm Estates pool rights. And right underneath, a grainy telephoto shot of my backyard. There I am, shirtless, sipping a beer, looking, I'll admit, a little too much like a squatter who's taken over a war memorial. There's even a fake community access timeline, completely made up, near as I can tell, listing water aerobic sessions and imaginary pool parties supposedly hosted on my property for years. I just shake my head. Into the trash it goes. Maybe that'd be the end of it. But that afternoon, my phone starts pinging with notifications. Turns out, the HOA Facebook page is having a meltdown. There's my photo, pinned at the top with the caption, "Our pool has been taken, but we won't give up." Hashtags galore. Take back the water. HOA United, like they're launching a political campaign or something. Karen's in the comments every 10 minutes, waving that same doctored map from 2004, assuring everyone that legal action is imminent. People are commenting left and right, some angry, some confused, a few with the gall to ask, wait, does the HOA actually own the pool? Those folks get dogpiled immediately. I try to ignore it, but then the stickers show up. Sometime between lunch and sunset, someone, or several someones, crept up and plastered big red and white decals on my fence posts and the front gate. Community amenity temporarily closed for legal review. HOA access required by designated hours. I peel them off, grumbling, but the gall of it is almost funny. They even left plastic HOA guest passes tossed in the bushes like they were marking their territory. That night, my security camera pings again. Someone's digging through my outdoor trash bin. I watch the footage. Shadowy figure pulls out the crumpled flyer I tossed earlier, poses it next to my mailbox like it's Exhibit A in a court case, snaps photos, then vanishes. I can't even begin to imagine what story they're spinning for themselves. At that point, I figure, okay, I need to start documenting everything. I take photos of every sticker, every pass, every flyer, every post. I save screenshots of Facebook threads, download all my security footage. If this is going to go to court, I want every ounce of crazy on the record. By Monday, I've got a manila folder thick enough to stun a mule. Photos of vandalized fences, screenshots of HOA propaganda, stills from my security cameras, Karen's stepladder escapade front and center. I'm not just annoyed anymore. I'm gearing up for battle. But I don't want to go nuclear right away. I'm not that guy, at least not yet. So I do what any rational person with an engineering degree and a grudge does. I call a lawyer. Her name's Jennifer Sloan, real estate litigator. 30 years of experience, reputation for making HOAs bleed legal fees till their accountants cry uncle. She picks up on the second ring, lets me tell the whole story, then starts asking for every document, every shred of evidence. I show up at her office the next day with my fat folder. She flips through it, not saying much, occasionally making a noise somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. She stops at the flyer claiming I'm illegally occupying community infrastructure. She glances up at me. They really think this'll work. They're persistent, I say, and a little bit unhinged. Jennifer shakes her head. Persistence isn't the law, but we're not taking any chances. She wants everything in writing, calls it preemptively building a record. We fire off a cease and desist to the HOA, certified mail. Attach a formal notice. Any further harassment or misrepresentation will result in immediate legal action. She even files a preservation order with the court in case the HOA gets creative with their records. Then comes the deep dive. Jennifer's got a contact at the county zoning office, an old friend who still owes her a favor. Within 2 days, we've got copies of every plat, development plan, and annexation record going back 30 years. No mention anywhere of my lot or its pool being anything other than private, single-owner property. But the real gold mine is the infamous map Karen keeps waving. Turns out it's a doctored copy of a legitimate map from 2004. Someone added a weird ELOT designation over my parcel, labeling it Rec Facility. The font doesn't match. The label's crooked. It looks like it was slapped together by a middle schooler in MS Paint. Jennifer checks the metadata on the digital file. Edited 6 months ago by R. Blake. She grins like a shark. Raymond Blake, Karen's husband, former land use consultant, quit the county 2 years ago after an ethics complaint. She finds the record. Raymond got caught trying to sneak a park annexation onto someone else's land in a neighboring subdivision. It's a pattern, a hobby, maybe even a business model for these people. Jennifer gets mad in that professional way, which is scary. We file a formal complaint with the city zoning board, attach every scrap of evidence, and make it clear. We're not waiting for a lawsuit. We're going to choke this thing off before it mutates. That night, I pour myself a drink, toss another HOA flyer in the trash, and settle in. If they wanted a war, well, they just started one. The lawsuit arrives a week later. Big white envelope, hand-delivered by a courier who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. The complaint is a fever dream. HOA wants not just recognition of the pool as a community amenity, but a formal easement for scheduled access, financial restitution for loss of usage, and my personal favorite, an injunction against hostile occupation. I send it all to Jennifer. Her reply is 5 words. Let's bury them. See you Monday. The hearing is set for 2 weeks out, and the neighborhood goes berserk in the meantime. Karen posts a formal statement on the HOA Facebook, all caps, full of legalese and rallying cries. Justice will prevail. She even uploads a photo of my pool, taken through the fence, with the caption, soon to be free again. It would almost be funny if I wasn't living it. But then the real curveball comes. The HOA attorney submits a sworn statement from Walter Hendricks, 82, claims he's been in the neighborhood since 97, and says that everyone always knew the pool was common property. Jennifer almost spits her coffee when she reads it. You know this guy? I nod. He lives 2 streets down. He once screamed at Karen for parking too close to his mailbox. Jennifer smirks. He's probably being pressured. Let's see what we can dig up. 2 days later, she calls giddy. Turns out 5 years ago, Walter gave an oral history interview to the city library, all on video. In it, he talks about how he always admired the house by the lake with the big private pool I never set foot in. Jennifer pulls the transcript, files it with the court, gets an affidavit from the library confirming the date. Legally speaking, it's a body slam. Meanwhile, cracks start to show. A couple of neighbors quietly reach out to me, Facebook DMs, emails, saying they never supported the lawsuit, they just didn't want to get on Karen's bad side. One elderly woman says Karen bullied her into signing a petition she didn't understand. The walls are closing in, but Karen? She doubles down. The night before the hearing, I'm getting ready for bed when my phone buzzes. Motion alert on the backyard camera. Raccoons, I figure. But no, this is different. There's a man in a hoodie, bolt cutters in hand, crouching by my gate. He cuts the lock, strides in with a duffel bag, and starts planting signs all around the pool. Community pool access restored by HOA order. HOA property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I call 911, heart pounding, and watch as the guy zip ties a new padlock on my gate. Cheap plastic with the HOA logo stenciled on. It would be hilarious if it wasn't so insane. Cops arrive in 3 minutes flat, catch the guy mid-escape. Turns out, it's Tim Harder, HOA vice president, Karen's right-hand man. He looks shocked to be treated like a criminal. I hand over the camera footage, and the officers haul him away in cuffs. One cop asks if I want to press charges. I don't hesitate. Absolutely. The fallout is instant. The arrest report gets leaked, and the HOA Facebook explodes. Karen tries to backpedal, posts a vague, not authorized by the board statement, but nobody's buying it. Half the neighbors are demanding accountability. The other half are asking, wait, is it even our pool? I gather up all the signs, passes, and plastic Tim left behind, dump them in a trash bag, and drop them at Jennifer's office with a note. Exhibit. Smells like entitlement. The morning of the hearing feels like the calm before a hurricane. I throw on my least wrinkled blazer, try to look like someone who's slept in the past week. Jennifer's all business. Rolling case, thumb drive labeled HOA meltdown. The courtroom is small, no marble columns, just neutral carpet and a judge who looks exhausted by life. Karen sits at the plaintiff's table in a cream pantsuit, radiating self-importance like a fog. Her lawyer looks nervous. The judge asks the HOA's side to present first. Karen's attorney delivers a speech about community spirit and historic use like he's running for Congress. Then comes the map, the infamous Dr. Map. He acts like he's producing the Ark of the Covenant. Jennifer waits, then asks to introduce her own documents. The original, unaltered map and metadata showing the doctoring, all traced to Raymond Blake, Karen's husband. The judge raises an eyebrow. Any relation to the plaintiff? Karen squirms. Jennifer supplies the details. Former land use consultant, history of ethics complaints. Then Jennifer gets to work, lays out the real deed, zoning maps, the Walter Hendricks video, the library affidavit. She even introduces subpoenaed HOA records showing Karen reimbursed herself for leadership expenses, printing flyers, buying signs, even the bolt cutters Tim used to break in. The judge stops her. Ms. Blake, did you authorize these purchases? Karen blinks. Well, yes, but so you used HOA funds to finance a trespass? Her lawyer objects, but the room goes dead silent. The judge calls a recess. I step into the hall, exhaling for the first time in days. A couple reporters loiter, notepads out. When we return, the judge's tone is all business. The plaintiff's claims are without merit, built upon fraudulent documentation and misrepresentation. The defendant, Mr. Maddox, is the sole legal owner of the disputed property. Karen sits stone-faced. The judge continues. The court is considering sanctions for abuse of process and misuse of HOA authority. Ms. Blake, you are advised to seek counsel. Jennifer just leans over and whispers, checkmate. As we leave, Karen is still sitting there, attorney already packing up like he wants to disappear. She doesn't even look at me. 2 weeks later, I get the official verdict in the mail, a heavy envelope with the county seal pressed into the flap. The kind of thing that makes most people's stomachs drop. Me, I pour myself a drink before I even open it. I already know what's inside, but seeing it in writing, black and white, is like slamming the last page of a ridiculous, expensive novel closed for good. The court's ruling is blunt, detailed, and, honestly, a little poetic. Silver Palm Estates HOA, and Karen Blake specifically, found liable for fraudulent misrepresentation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and trespass. The judge doesn't mince words, calls it a blatant abuse of organizational authority and a deliberate campaign of harassment against a private citizen. That private citizen being yours truly. The kicker? HOA owes me $120,000 in damages. Some compensatory, some punitive. The ruling even breaks it down. Property repairs, legal fees, and a little extra, as the judge put it, for the unique inconvenience of defending one's pool from a hostile committee of clipboard crusaders. Karen doesn't show up for the ruling. She's already started her disappearing act, stepped down as HOA president for personal reasons. The less loyal board members talk, though. Apparently, she tried to convince them to appeal until they saw the financials and realized their insurance wouldn't cover fraud. Suddenly, Karen is radioactive. Raymond Blake, her husband, goes silent. Rumor is he packed up his office and started cold calling for references. Good luck with that. The city zoning board gets involved, launches an inquiry into the HOA's history. Turns out there were old complaints, quiet ones, never escalated, about Karen trying to enforce HOA rules on homes outside their jurisdiction. One retired couple says she threatened them with fines for painting their mailbox the wrong color. Never mind, they weren't even members. Her reign of intimidation wasn't new. It was just finally documented. With Karen gone, the HOA starts to implode. 3 more board members resign in the same week. The treasurer announces that the reserve fund is critically depleted, mostly legal fees and Karen's discretionary reimbursements. It's a polite way of saying Karen treated HOA money like her personal war chest. The neighborhood splits, some embarrassed, some furious. The Facebook group vanishes overnight. Someone scrawls, "No queen, no court," on the HOA bulletin board with a Sharpie. Poetic, if you ask me. One neighbor, Martha, bakes me a pie as a peace offering. She stands on my porch, hands it over, looking anywhere but my eyes. "I never agreed with what she was doing," she mumbles. "We were just scared." I take the pie, nod, and tell her we're fine. I mean it mostly. Herd mentality is real, and Karen was a hell of shepherd. But the spell's broken now. The HOA isn't dissolved, not officially, but between the legal ruling, the resignations, the city breathing down their necks, it's basically a zombie organization. No money, no leadership, no bite. All that's left is the memory of a very public, very humiliating disaster, and a whole street full of people hoping no reporter ever comes knocking. Me? I take my payout, hire a contractor to fix the gate Tim butchered, and add a couple more cameras just in case nostalgia strikes. It's over. Not clean, not painless, but done. And anyone walking past my fence will see a new sign hung beside the gate. Private property, no trespassing, no HOA jurisdiction. Underneath, in smaller type, yes, we're still keeping score. The party that followed wasn't planned. It just kind of happened, like everyone knew we needed a reset. It started with a few texts, folks dropping hints, talking about celebrating the end of the HOA empire. Suddenly, I've got 20 RSVPs and a catering truck booked through a guy named Steve, who swears his brisket can cause religious experiences. I spend the morning pressure washing the pool deck, stringing up lights, blasting a playlist that swings from outlaw country to 90s alt-rock. People arrive around 3. Mostly non-HOA folks, a few of the sheepish ex-board members bearing brownies and six-packs, like war reparations. Nobody mentions Karen, but the jokes flow. Should we put tape lines down for swimming hours? Anybody bring their guest pass? Even the city inspector shows up, shakes my hand, mutters, "Glad to see sanity win one for a change." At sunset, I bring out the surprise, a new sign, matte black, laser engraved, hung inside the gate. Private property, not your pool, not your HOA, stay on your side. It gets a round of applause and a couple of laughs. One neighbor says, "That belongs in a museum of pettiness." I grin. Consider it preventative maintenance. Folks swim, eat, swap stories. The tension that had gripped the street for months starts to uncoil. No talk of lawsuits or bylaws, just burgers, music, relief. One couple asks if I'll host again next year. If the HOA doesn't rise from the dead, maybe I tell them. When the last guest drifts off and the night falls quiet, I'm alone by the pool, feet dangling in the water, looking up at the stars. The house is still. My land, my rules, my silence finally restored. No flyers, no ladders, no pounding on the door. Just the wind in the pines, crickets, and the soft splash of water that at long last belongs to no one but me. But you know what? Sometimes on the edge of sleep, I catch myself listening. For what? I'm not sure. A gate creak, a faint clip-clop of heels, maybe the distant flutter of a laminated map. I laugh at myself and roll over. If there's one thing I learned, it's that peace is something you have to fight for sometimes, fight hard and dirty, and with everything you've got. And if you're lucky, if you're really, really lucky, you get to keep it for just a little while. Thing is, even with the legal battles over and Karen's shadow fading, real life doesn't just tie itself up with a bow. There are loose threads everywhere. Little aftershocks that rattle the porch when you least expect it. That first week of so-called freedom, I still half expected to wake up to a fresh sticker on my mailbox or a silent, angry mob out front. Old habits, you know. Bit eye slow. A few days after the party, I'm working in the yard, digging out an old rosebush that never quite took. When Adam rolls up, the same buddy who'd seen the first round of HOA drama. He parks, hops out, and grins at me like a man who's just seen the sun for the first time all year. "You really do look lighter, Cole," he says, handing me a coffee. "I thought you were going to sprout roots and start growing moss when I first visited." I laugh, lean on my shovel, and for the first time in months, it's easy. Hell, I might just try. Nothing wrong with being part of the landscape. Adam walks the property with me, admiring the new fence and the repaired gate. We end up by the pool, feet in the water, shooting the breeze. He asks, "You ever think about just renting this place out, letting someone else deal with the headaches?" I shake my head, grinning. Nah, this place is my stubbornness, carved in wood and stone. I earned every inch, and I'm not leaving because of some board committee. We watch the sun dip behind the trees, the lake catching fire with the last light of the day. The quiet settles in, not the brittle quiet of dread, but the deep, honest kind. I realize that's what I'd been chasing since the first day. Not silence, but peace. That week, the neighborhood slowly rearranges itself. The HOA clubhouse sits empty, locked, and dusty. The old signboard where Karen used to post bulletins is blank, except for a faded scrap paper flapping in the wind. The Facebook group stays gone, though every once in a while, a new message thread will pop up. Nothing official, just neighbors talking about cookouts, weather, or who's got the best lawnmower. Martha, the pie-baking neighbor, stops by more often, always with an excuse, returning borrowed tools, dropping off leftover cookies, asking about garden tips. One day she stays longer, sitting at my kitchen table as rain beats on the windows. "I still feel bad," she says, twisting her hands. "None of us should have let it go as far as it did." I tell her the truth. People get scared, Martha. Herds follow the loudest voice until someone puts their foot down. Then they remember how to think for themselves. She nods, her face softening. "We're better than that, I hope." I shrug. "We'll see. But for now, nobody's standing on my fence with a clipboard." We both laugh, and it's the sort of laughter that shakes something loose, bitterness, maybe, or regret. Either way, it feels like healing. Over the next few months, little reminders of the war keep surfacing. I find an old community amenity closed for legal review, sticker stuffed in a crack by the shed. A broken guest pass turns up in the flower bed. Once when I'm out for a walk, I pass Karen's old place. Windows dark, yard overgrown, a for sale sign sagging in the mud. Rumor is she left town, moved in with a sister a few counties over. I can't say I miss her. One Saturday, I get a letter, this time a real one, from a neighbor I barely know, a guy named Don. He writes to thank me for reminding everyone that rights means something. Says he'd lived here 15 years, always kept his head down, but maybe it's time he started showing up for things. He asks if I'd ever consider running for something, like a proper neighborhood council, minus the madness. I laugh, but tuck the letter away. You never know. Later, when the leaves start turning, the city inspector drops by. No appointment, no warning, just a wave and a smile as he walks the fence line. "Place looks good," he says, peering at the new sign. "Think I'm safe now?" I ask, half joking. He grins. "Far as I can tell, you're the only one out here who bothers reading the rules." I walk him around the property, show him the repairs, the new cameras. He shakes my hand before he leaves. Glad to see someone when won for the right reasons. Don't lose this. Places like this are rare. He's right. That night, sitting out under the porch light, watching the moon skip across the lake, I feel it, something close to gratitude, or maybe just the simple relief of knowing I can go to bed without having to check the security app every 10 minutes. The neighborhood doesn't go back to the way it was before. Maybe it never will. But folks wave a little more, linger a little longer when they meet at the end of a driveway. There's a feeling, hard to put into words, that maybe the worst is behind us. And if the future brings trouble, at least we know how to stand up for ourselves. Me? I finally finished the pool renovation. New tile, fresh paint, LED lights that shift from blue to green to purple with the click of a button. I invite Adam, Martha, Don, and a handful of the others over for a quiet barbecue. No signs, no rules, just burgers, laughter, and the easy comfort of people who've weathered something together. As the night winds down, someone asks if I regret it. All the trouble, the fights, the sleepless nights. I take a long look at the water, the lights, the home I nearly lost to someone else's fantasy. No, I say, honest as I've ever been. Not for a second. If you don't fight for what's yours, you'll lose it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find out you're not fighting alone. The fire dies down, the guests drift off, and I'm left with the soft hum of summer, the sound of crickets, and the deep, clear certainty that for all the madness, I'd do it again. And that's the truth. Messy, hard-earned, and all mine. You know, funny thing is, after the fireworks, after the headlines faded and Karen's legend turned into just another cautionary tale whispered at block parties, life didn't suddenly become storybook perfect. It got real. In some ways, more real than before. The old HOA signs came down, but people's habits took longer to change. The next couple months, I got used to being the guy who stood up. Neighbors I'd barely nodded at before would flag me down when I went for a walk. Some wanted the details, others just to say thanks, or to vent about something as simple as trash pickup or streetlights that never seemed to work right. I started learning names I'd never bothered with. Ed, who always mowed his lawn in perfect lines. Sandy, who ran the garden club and had opinions about everything. Mel, who'd lived here so long he still remembered when there were more cows than houses out here. One evening, just before Halloween, I was out by the driveway when I heard a hesitant, "Hey, Cole." I turned to see a group of teens from up the road, arms full of carved pumpkins, awkward but hopeful. "Would you mind if we set these up on your fence? Yours always looks best with the lights, and, well, nobody's using the clubhouse anymore." What could I say? I helped them line up their jack-o'-lanterns, plugged in a strand of orange lights, and before long, a mini parade of kids was running up, showing off costumes, grinning with mouths full of candy. For the first time, I saw that fence, my fortress during the war, turn into something that connected instead of divided. The holidays rolled in on a cold front. Martha brought over a pie so heavy with pecans it nearly bent my table. Don invited me to his church's Thanksgiving dinner, and I went, surprising us both. The HOA's ghost lingered, sure, budget shortfalls, maintenance questions, a few leftover grumblers trying to resurrect the old rules. But now, decisions happen on porches and around fire pits, not in secret meetings. Arguments didn't disappear, but they lost their edge. People could disagree without picking sides like a battlefield. And the pool? The pool became legend. Not a community center, not a forbidden prize, just what it should have been all along, a backyard oasis, a place for friends and neighbors to cool off on a sticky summer night, a little splash of sanity in a world that sometimes forgets how to be kind. One Sunday, Adam shows up, kids in tow, each with a neon floaty and enough sunscreen to paint the deck. He slaps me on the back. "You realize you're famous, right? There's a betting pool in the city about whether your mailbox survives another year." We laugh. We grill burgers. We let the kids race for cannonballs. Nobody checks their watch. Nobody asks about bylaws or pool schedules or guest passes. For the first time, I let myself believe the storm really had passed. And yet, every now and then, when the wind shifts just right, I think I catch a whiff of that old fear of losing what's mine, of someone reaching over the line. That's not paranoia. That's experience. There's a lesson there, something I hope the folks around here won't soon forget. You can't guard your peace with paperwork alone. Sometimes you have to fight for it, one fence post, one late-night email, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. Winter settles in. The lake ices over. The house creaks and groans as the cold presses in. But I feel a warmth I haven't known in years. Martha brings over her famous cinnamon rolls on Christmas Eve. Ed stops by with a flask and a grin. Mel invites me to his New Year's bonfire, and under the crackling sparks, I realize I've somehow become part of the story here. Not just the guy who won a lawsuit, but a neighbor, finally. On New Year's Day, I hang up a new sign on my porch. Nothing fancy, just hand-painted letters. Welcome, friends and troublemakers only. The irony isn't lost on me. Later, as I sit by the pool, ice crusted on the cover, steam rising from my mug, I think about everything that happened. All the lines drawn, all the ground gained and lost. I think about Karen, wherever she ended up, and I hope, honestly, that she found a place where she can be happy or at least too busy to bother anyone else. Mostly, though, I think about this simple truth. Peace isn't something you inherit. You claim it. You defend it. You tend it like a stubborn old garden, thorns and all. And if you do it right, if you're stubborn enough and lucky enough and just a little bit wild, you just might find you're not alone after all. So, to anyone out there fighting their own battle, against HOAs or noisy neighbors or whatever madness the world throws their way, I'll say this. Keep your records, know your rights, but don't forget to wave to the folks on your street. Sometimes, the best defense is just being a real person, honest, imperfect, and willing to share a cold drink on a hot day. And as for me, well, I'll be right here listening to the wind and the laughter, watching the sun set over a pool that's mine again for as long as I can hold it. You know what I mean? Spring creeps in slow and muddy that year, thawing out what winter left behind. Old grievances, broken branches, and the last of the red and white stickers buried under a pile of leaves. My world settles into something that feels not just peaceful, but solid. I wake early, let the dog out, breathe in the scent of wet earth and pine sap, and realize I don't jump at every knock on the door anymore. The neighborhood, in its own strange way, finds new balance. There's no official HOA anymore. Nobody wants the job, and the city makes it clear they're not stepping in to resurrect it. Without the threat of fines or fake maps, the folks who are always happiest keeping to themselves seem to breathe easier. For others, like Martha and Don, it's a chance to try something new. There's talk of a monthly potluck, a garden swap, maybe even a neighborhood softball game once the field dries out. I'm not the ringleader, just the guy who says yes when someone asks if they can use my backyard for a barbecue, or borrow a ladder, or leave a pie on my porch. Sometimes late at night, I think about how close I came to losing all of this to one person's fantasy, a single map, a handful of signatures, and a crowd willing to follow the loudest voice at least for a while. It'd be easy to get bitter about that, but honestly, I'm grateful. The fire forged something real, friendships built on shared struggle, and respect that wasn't there before. Kids ride their bikes along my fence now, and nobody shouts about property lines. When a new couple moves into Karen's old place, a young family with 2 golden retrievers and a baby that never seems to sleep, I walk over and introduce myself, hands open, not holding a folder of legal documents. They ask what happened to the last owners. I just smile and say, long story. Ask me over a beer sometime. There's a kind of freedom in not having to look over your shoulder. I fix up the pool house, replace the cracked tile with something Martha swears is too nice for a bachelor. Adam helps me build a fire pit by the lake. Don and Ed dig out the overgrown path down to the water, telling stories the whole time about the old days when this was just scrub and mud and wild grapevines before the developers and the drama and the days of someone thinking they could run your life because they got elected at a potluck. Sometimes I sit by that fire after everyone's gone home, staring into the coals, thinking about everything that changed. It's quiet, but never lonely. I get texts now, invites to dinners, calls to help move a sofa, the usual stuff neighbors do for each other when they're not at war. One night, late spring, a thunderstorm rolls in, big sky, purple lightning, the kind that shakes the windows and rattles your bones. I watch the rain pummel the pool and the wind bend the trees. And for a wild second, I think I see a stepladder's shadow out near the fence. My heart skips, but it's only the night and my own memory playing tricks. After the storm passes, I wander outside barefoot, let the cold grass soak my feet, and breathe deep. The sign on my gate, private property, in no trespassing, in no HOA jurisdiction, gleams in the fresh-washed moonlight. But I realize I don't need it the way I did before. It's become a joke, a symbol, a piece of the story, something to laugh about over beers, not a warning to the world. A week later, I get a handwritten note This time not from a neighbor, but from the city's zoning board, just a simple card. Thanks for standing up for what's right. If every neighborhood had a Cole, we'd have fewer lawsuits and more barbecues. Enjoy your summer. I pin it next to the deed, in the same folder where I keep the court ruling and the infamous doctored map. Not as trophies, just reminders of what I learned, of what I almost lost, of how sometimes the smallest patch of ground is worth every ounce of fight you've got. And when the sun comes up the next morning, I open every window in the house, let the bird song in, and for the first time in a long, long while, I feel like the world is finally, truly mine. By midsummer, you can feel a kind of gentle amnesia settle over the neighborhood. The way trees heal around old wounds, bark thickening and covering the scar, even if the shape of what happened lingers underneath. Folks don't talk about Karen or the pool war much anymore. But every so often, the memory ripples through a joke, a shared glance, the collective exhale of people who survived something together. The new family in Karen's old place settles in quick. Their little boy, Charlie, spends afternoons tossing rocks into the lake, his dog leaping after every splash. Sometimes his mom waves at me, a little embarrassed, calling, "Sorry if he gets too close to your fence." I laugh and shake my head, wave back. Not a problem. If he find my old baseball out there, it's his to keep. It feels good, that easy camaraderie. No tension, no subtext, just neighbors being neighbors. Don invites me and a few others over for poker night. Turns out the man's got a legendary poker face and a laugh that rattles the kitchen windows. At the table, stories flow, some true, some wild exaggerations, all colored by the shared sense of hard-won belonging. Martha brings her famous lemon bars, and Ed grills hot dogs on a rusty old hibachi. At some point, someone jokes, "Careful, or the pool police will show up." The whole table cracks up. Even the new folks catch the drift and grin. The old wounds are healing, patched over with laughter and the soft glue of shared memory. The backyard fills with life again. I host barbecues, small ones at first, just a couple neighbors, then bigger gatherings as word gets around. No guest lists, no sign-in sheets, no clipboards. People wander in and out, bringing chips or soda or stories about long-forgotten neighborhood squabbles. The pool is just a pool, at last, a blue rectangle of water reflecting the sky, laughter echoing across its surface. Sometimes, I think back to the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, dreading what tomorrow might bring. The endless emails, the stacks of evidence, the sting of betrayal from people I barely knew. If I'm honest, there's still moments when I lock up the house at night, checking the side gate, making sure the cameras are working. Not because I expect trouble, but because the old instincts don't fade easy. But then I catch myself, leaning back in a lawn chair, Adam cracking a joke beside me, the sound of kids playing tag in the dusk, and I know I'm safe. Not because a court told me so, not because I put up a sign, but because I chose to fight, and in doing so, found a place where I belong. Martha, ever the neighborhood historian, starts putting together a scrapbook, a goofy, heartfelt chronicle of the year the pool almost became a battleground. She asked me for a copy of that infamous map. I dig it out of the folder, hand it over, and we both laugh until we can barely breathe. "You ought to frame this," she says. "Hang in the bathroom for future generations." Or the guest room, I say, grinning. A warning to clipboard carriers everywhere. As summer wears on, the old HOA clubhouse is slowly reborn, not as a center of rules and forms, but as a kind of community hall. The city finally takes over maintenance. People organize a flea market, a Halloween haunted house, even a little bluegrass concert one warm Saturday night. Charlie's dad strings up fairy lights, and I help Ed haul old furniture out of storage. There's music, laughter, and for the first time in a long while, nobody cares who's in charge. The real legacy, I think, isn't the court verdict or the sign on my gate. It's the way people talk to each other now, directly, honestly, with the kind of respect that only comes from knowing you've all come out the other side of something together. On the last weekend before fall, Adam and I sit on the dock, feet dangling over the water, fishing rods in hand. The sun dips low, the world awash in gold. He glances at me and says, You think it'll last this time? I shrug, thoughtful. Nothing lasts forever. But maybe, just maybe, we remember the right lessons. He nods, quiet, the way friends are when words don't need to fill the space. And that's the truth of it. Peace isn't a finish line. It's a habit, a daily practice, a thing you keep building together, even when it'd be easier to let old scars reopen. You defend your patch of earth. You forgive when you can. You watch the sun set with people you trust. And you let yourself hope. If that's not winning, I don't know what is. A year rolls by, almost quietly. So quietly sometimes that the roar of that old conflict feels like a bad dream. Some other life lived by some other guy. The seasons turn. The lake freezes and thaws. The crickets give way to snowplows. And neighbors who once traded suspicious glances now trade shovels and casseroles without a second thought. I get used to the little routines. The dog pawing at the door before sunrise. Adam texting at odd hours. Brisket. My place. Saturday. Don't bring beer. I bought too much. Ed's mower humming along the edge of my yard, carving lines into the grass with surgical precision. There are headaches, leaky gutters, squirrels in the attic, the power flickering off just as I'm fixing dinner. But they're the normal kind, the good kind, the stuff you grumble about and then let go. Sometimes people ask about the lawsuit. A cousin from out of state, or a guy at the hardware store who's heard a version of the story from someone's aunt. That was you, they'll say, a little awe and a little pity in their voice, as if I survived a bear attack or escaped from Alcatraz. I never know what to tell them. The truth is, it wasn't about the pool. It wasn't even about the money, though that payout sure helped patch up more than a few bruises. It was about something smaller, quieter, harder to define, the right to sit on my porch in the evening and listen to the world settle, without wondering when the next battle's coming. One night, I'm out by the fire pit, a few embers glowing as the party fades. Adam's asleep in the hammock, a half-empty can of beer balanced on his chest. Martha's cleaning up dessert plates, humming some old country tune under her breath. I stare at the stars and realize, maybe for the first time, how lucky I am. It wasn't luck that got me here, though. It was stubbornness, plain and simple. Stubbornness and a kind of faith that if I kept pushing, if I stood my ground and didn't blink, the world might just bend the right way. That's a lesson I hope I never forget, that I hope nobody here ever forgets. As the years pile up, the story of the Great Pool War gets retold, embellished, exaggerated, sanded down into something almost funny. I hear a kid tell his friend, "My dad says the pool used to be a secret government bunker, but Mr. Maddox won it in a poker game." I just smile, let the legend grow. If it makes people laugh, if it reminds them that ordinary folks can win sometimes, then let the myth run wild. The new neighbors, Charlie's family, grow roots. His mom joins the garden club. His dad volunteers to coach Little League. I give Charlie a job mowing the lawn, and he takes it way more seriously than I ever did. The fence that once marked the front lines of a battle now hosts sunflowers and a string of bird feeders. Sometimes I see Charlie showing his friends where the famous signs used to hang. He's got no fear, just a wild, summer grin and the kind of joy that belongs only to the very young. Every so often a city inspector drives by, slows down, gives me a wave. Don stops over with a six-pack and advice about what not to plant by the septic field. Martha brings over her scrapbook, now bursting with clippings and photos, the final pages filled with party snapshots, jokes, inside references that only mean something to the people who lived through it. One autumn evening, as the air turns sharp and the trees paint the lake golden red, I throw a small get-together. Nothing fancy, just folks from up and down the street, old faces and new. The conversation rolls on, and eventually someone, maybe Ed, maybe Don, raises a glass and says, "To Cole, and to never letting anybody tell you your pool isn't yours." The laughter that follows is genuine, loose, full of gratitude. Someone snaps a picture. Me, grinning, arm around Adam. Neighbors cluster together, the pool behind us blue as memory. And I realize, in that moment, that peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the presence of people willing to fight for it with you, and to celebrate when the fighting's done. If anyone had asked me, back when Karen climbed that ladder for the first time, how the story would end. I never would have guessed this. Not the lawsuits, not the headlines, not the victory, not even the friendships. But I'm grateful, deep down, bones and blood grateful, that I was stubborn enough and lucky enough to see it through. So here's to stubbornness, and to peace, and to every person who's ever stood up for the little patch of earth they call home. May you win your battles. May you keep your pool. And may your only worries on long summer nights be whether you've got enough ice for the lemonade. Time's a strange thing. One day you're counting the hours between certified letters and sleepless nights. The next you blink and it's 5, 10 years since anyone's mentioned HOA in anything but a joke. The neighborhood keeps changing. Kids grow taller, hairlines recede, porches get painted new colors. The scars are still there, if you know where to look. A little patch of fence at a shade newer than the rest, a smudge on a mailbox post where someone once slapped a sticker, the old clubhouse finally repurposed as a rec center, walls lined with faded photos of block parties, soccer games, and a single, infamous map under glass, captioned, "Retired with honors." Charlie, that toddler with the golden retrievers? He's in high school now, drives a rickety old truck that rattles louder than the thunder and always waves when he sees me. He's mowed more lawns than most folks walk in a year, and every once in a while he'll stop by after school, asking to borrow a wrench or just to talk about life. "Hey, Mr. Maddox, is it true you once chased someone off your property with a shovel?" I just shake my head and laugh. The truth's somewhere between what you heard and what actually happened. But I'll tell you, it wasn't the shovel that scared him. It was the paperwork. He grins, the kind of wide, easy grin you only see on kids who grew up with room to breathe. Don and Ed, the old guard, still wander by. Don's got less hair, Ed's got more stories. Martha's grandkids run through the yard in summer, chasing fireflies, their laughter drifting up with the dusk. Adam's around less these days. Work, kids, life pulling him in a dozen directions. But we make time when it matters. Birthdays, holidays, nights when you just need to sit by the lake and let the world slow down. The pool, once a symbol of conflict, now just part of the background. People ask if I ever considered selling, cashing out while the market's hot. Maybe someday, but not yet. Not while there's another barbecue to host, another neighbor to welcome, another lazy Sunday afternoon to lose track of. There's a comfort to the sameness, the rituals, the routines. I fix what breaks, mow what grows, keep an eye on the sky and the fences, more out of habit than necessity. I'll become the guy people come to for advice about property lines, city permits, what to do when a branch falls on the power line. I never charge for the help. I figure the neighborhood paid its dues in full a long time ago. On the anniversary of the big court ruling, Martha insists on bringing over her scrapbook for a reread, as if the memories might wear thin without a little polish. We sit on the porch, flipping through pages. There's the picture of me, hair a little darker, eyes a little wilder, holding up that verdict letter with both fists raised like I just won the Super Bowl. There's a shot of Tim Harder being loaded into the back of a police cruiser, still in his HOA polo. Someone pasted a little cartoon speech bubble above his head. But it's for the community. We laugh, but there's a tenderness there, too. A recognition that time has softened the hard edges but hasn't erased them. We remember who stood by us, who learned from the fight, and who quietly faded away. The new families that move in hear the story secondhand. To them, I'm just the guy with the best 4th of July cookout, the quiet fixer who'll help dig out a stump or lend a power washer with no strings attached. Sometimes someone asks about the sign on my gate, still there, the paint faded, but the words still readable. I tell them it's a keepsake, a little piece of history, a reminder that sometimes the small battles matter more than you think. And every so often when the house is quiet, I sit by the pool, feet in the water, watching the stars ripple across the surface. I think about everything that happened, about Karen, about lawsuits, about fear and stubbornness, and the way people come together when they have to. I think about what it means to belong somewhere, to be part of a place, not just an address or a lot number, but a living piece of the story. I wouldn't trade a minute of it, not for all the peace in the world, because peace earned, fought for, protected, shared, is the kind that lasts. So for anyone still fighting their own neighborhood battle, for anyone feeling small against the tide. Hang in there. Keep your records. Know your neighbors. Don't be afraid to stand up when a moment calls for it. Because the day will come when you look around and realize this is yours, not just because you bought it, but because you held on together. And if you ever find yourself out by a quiet lake, a little older, a little wiser, remember to leave the porch light on. You never know who might wander by, needing a story, a cold drink, or just a reminder that sometimes the good guys win. You keep living, and time keeps doing its work, smoothing out the drama until what's left are the lessons. The kind that sneak up on you when you're fixing a gate latch or sitting at the water's edge, counting dragonflies in the heat of August. Sometimes on those golden, lazy evenings, a car will slow in front of my place, some new face behind the wheel, peering at the mailbox or at the old sign by my fence. I'll give him a wave, open, friendly, a neighborly welcome without a single clipboard in sight. The community, for all its bumps and bruises, has become what it always should have been, a real neighborhood. People drift in and out of each other's lives. There's a rhythm, birthday parties on the lawn, last-minute block potlucks, shared tools, quiet gestures of care. We mark the passing years in pies, repairs, and a gentle choreography of snow shovels lining the street after a storm. Every now and then, a problem crops up, a tree down in a summer squall, a fence that needs mending, the never-ending debate about who should host Thanksgiving. But instead of flyers or finger-pointing, it's just folks showing up with saws, hammers, casseroles, and jokes about emergency HOA meetings that make everyone laugh. The only rules now are the ones we actually need. Close your gate behind you, lend a hand when you can, and don't leave your grill unattended after midnight unless you want Adam to show up for a midnight snack. The old clubhouse, that former symbol of control, has become a kind of heart for us, a place for town halls that are more about listening than telling, for craft fairs and movie nights, for teenagers sneaking sodas and little kids hunting Easter eggs in the grass. I go there sometimes just to watch, a quiet observer, while the world spins on without anyone arguing about pool hours or mailbox color. Charlie, nearly grown now, brings his friends around, sometimes for help with a car, sometimes just to hear the legend of the HOA from the man who lived it. I'll hand him the infamous map, let them gawk, laugh, pass it around like a pirate's treasure. Their eyes are bright, curious, unburdened by the weight of what that map once meant. It's just a story to them, a good one, but not a threat. That's how you know things have changed. One summer night, a handful of us sit by the pool, trading tales. The moon's bright, the water's still, and someone asks, "Cole, if you could go back, would you do it all again?" I think about it for a minute, about all the sleep I lost, the knots in my stomach, the fear and the anger. But I also think about the friendships forged, the lessons learned, the fierce pride I feel every time I look around and see people who aren't afraid to stand up, to laugh together, to call this place home. I shrug, a smile on my voice, in a heartbeat, but I try to get a little more sleep this time. We all laugh, and the night feels as endless and forgiving as summer itself. A week later, Martha stops by with her grandkids, one of them clutching a crumpled flyer she found while digging in the garden. "What's this, Mr. Maddox?" she asks, eyes wide. I grin. That's just a piece of history, a reminder of what happens when folks forget what really matters. You hang on to your friends, your land, and your good sense, kiddo. That's how you keep a neighborhood safe. She beams, and Martha winks at me over her shoulder. The world moves on, but some stories stay put, growing softer and funnier with every retelling, until they're part of the bedrock, woven into the roots of every tree, every laugh that rings across the lake. And me? I'm still here, still stubborn, still grateful, still ready to stand my ground if I ever have to, but more than anything, still hopeful. Hopeful that peace, real, honest peace, isn't just a break between battles, but a habit, a choice, a gift you give and receive every day you call a place your own. So if you ever find yourself fighting for what's right, don't back down. Plant your feet, gather your friends, tell your story as loud and as often as you have to. You might just wake up one morning and find the fight is over, and what's left is something better than you ever imagined. yours. Years slide by, soft and slow, then suddenly fast, until even the old battles become something gentle, something you can smile about instead of wince. The neighborhood is older, wiser, roots running deeper now. The trees Adam and I planted are thick and tall, giving shade to picnic tables that seem to multiply every summer. The pool is still here, blue and clear, patched and repainted a few times, but always a gathering spot when the heat rolls in. I start to notice how the stories get passed on. New neighbors, fresh faces, young families, retirees drawn by the quiet lake and good schools. Move in and make the place theirs. They inherit the rhythm. Friday cookouts, Sunday yard work, the unofficial rule that anyone's welcome to borrow a ladder or a cup of sugar. When someone asks about the old sign or the faded marks on the fence, the tale gets retold. Sometimes accurate, sometimes wild, always with a twinkle in the eye. I'm the legend, the guy who stood his ground so everyone else could plant theirs. It's a role I never set out to play, but it fits now that the sharp edges have worn down to a smooth polish. Kids grow up, move away, then come back for holidays and pool parties, amazed that the world didn't shrink without them. I hear stories of distant cities, new jobs, first loves, and wild dreams that all started right here, where a neighborhood learned what it meant to truly stick together. Charlie leaves for college, comes back on weekends with friends who treat the pool like a sacred pilgrimage. He brings home a dog of his own, a rescue, wild-eyed and gentle, and jokes that every kid in the next generation will learn to swim in the infamous backyard. Adam's boys, almost men now, helped build a new dock one spring, laughing about how their dad used to call this place Switzerland because it was neutral ground for neighborhood disputes. Martha's grandkids start a lemonade stand at the edge of my driveway every summer. They ask me to taste test, and every year I tell them it's the best batch yet. Every 4th of July, the whole street lights up, grills smoking, fireworks blooming, laughter echoing across the lake. The city sends a single patrol car to keep the peace, but the officer usually ends up with a plate of barbecue and a chair at the table. Nobody asks about bylaws or pool schedules anymore. The only schedule that matters is sunset, and the only rule is if you see someone carrying too much, you offer a hand. There are moments when I sit on the porch, feet up, listening to the wind, and it's easy to forget how close we came to losing all of this. Sometimes a distant thunderstorm will roll in, the air will go heavy, and for just a second, I'll remember the taste of that old fear, the feeling of standing alone, holding a folder of deeds and dreams, wondering if it would ever be enough. But that feeling never lasts. Not anymore, because I know, now, deep down, marrow deep, that even if the world tries to take something from you, you don't have to fight alone. Not here. Not ever again. One evening, as the fireflies spark up and the crickets sing, Charlie leans against the porch rail, looking out over the yard. "You ever regret staying?" he asks, soft and serious, the way only someone with one foot in the future can be. I shake my head slow. Not once. If you love a place, you fight for it. And if you're lucky, the place fights for you right back. He smiles, a little older than his years, and I see in his eyes the glint of every hard lesson learned, every joy hard won, the kind of wisdom that sticks. So here we are, years gone by, seasons come and gone, the battles faded into legend. The fences still stand, the pool still sparkles, the laughter still rolls across the water at dusk. And me? I'm just grateful. Grateful for the land beneath my feet, for the neighbors who became family, for the chance to be a small part of something that will outlast us all. If you're ever out this way, follow the sound of the music and the laughter. There'll be a chair waiting for you, a cold drink, and maybe, if you ask nicely, a story or two about the year the neighborhood found its heart. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the only sound is the wind slipping through the trees, I'll sit by the window and look out at the yard, at the fence line I once guarded like a fortress, at the pool now shimmering in the glow of porch lights and laughter, at the old clubhouse down the street, bustling with some new celebration. The world feels settled, earned, peaceful, not perfect but honest. It's a kind of happiness I never quite imagined, the sort you don't chase so much as stumble into after a long, hard journey. There are new faces now, kids who never knew the fear of a notice on the door or the frustration of trying to reason with a clipboard. They grow up with freedom, with block parties and late-night flashlight tag, with stories about the Great Pool War that sound more like tall tales than warnings. Martha's grandkids build forts out of pool noodles and cardboard, shouting commands like defend the fence and no trespassers allowed. I watch them, and I can't help but laugh. The past has become a game, its dangers transformed by time into something light, playful, safe. Some evenings, I walk the edge of the property just because I can, not out of fear but out of habit, a little ritual that reminds me what it took to get here. I find remnants of the old battle from time to time. Bits of sticker still stuck to a post, a faded guest pass in the dirt, the corner of a flyer poking up through the grass after a rain. I leave most of it where it is, a quiet testament to persistence, a signal to anyone who knows how to look that peace here was never just given. It was claimed. Every so often, someone will stop by, new to the neighborhood, asking about the sign, about the stories, about the little traditions that have taken root since the war. I give him the tour. The garden, the pool, the battered old folder where I keep the map and the deed and the court ruling. We stand by the water as the sun goes down, and I tell them, this place isn't perfect, but it's ours. We look out for each other, and we know the cost of letting someone else draw the lines. The city sends out new inspectors every couple years. Faces change, but the verdict always comes back the same. Everything's in order, no complaints, neighborhood thriving. They shake my hand, sometimes a little starstruck, as if meeting the guy from the old stories carries some special weight. I tell them the same thing every time. We're just neighbors. We figured out how to do it right. Holidays come and go, and with each one, the rituals deepen. Thanksgiving dinners spill out onto lawns and porches. Fireworks blaze across the water every July. The first snow of winter brings out every kid in the block for sledding and snowman contests. Nobody asks who's in charge. Nobody worries about a rule book. We listen, we argue, we forgive, and we move on together. I keep the sign on the gate, private property, and no trespassing, and no HOA jurisdiction, though the words have softened into something like an inside joke. These days, it's less a warning and more a punchline, a reminder to all of us that what was hard-won can be easily kept, as long as we remember why we fought. And me? I get older, a little slower, maybe a little softer around the edges. But I never forget that first day on the porch, the hope I felt staring at the lake, and the fear that crept in when I realized how fast it could be taken. I keep that hope close now like a pocket stone, smooth, heavy, unshakable. I still sit out by the pool some evenings, drink in hand, watching the sky streak orange and pink and then settle into indigo. If Adam drops by, or Martha, or one of the kids grown tall and confident, we sit together and share the silence. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. The peace is in the presence, in the history, in knowing that after everything, we found a way to belong here, not just as owners, but as stewards, as neighbors, as family. If you're reading this, maybe you're fighting your own fight. Maybe you're wondering if it's worth the sleepless nights and the headaches and the risk of standing up when nobody else will. I won't pretend it's easy, but I'll tell you true. The reward isn't just in the winning. It's in the community that forms when you refuse to be pushed out. It's in the friends who show up for you when you need them most. It's in the laughter echoing off the water, the pies cooling on the windowsill, the small hands tugging at your sleeve, asking for a story. Fight for it. Keep going. Make your stand. Because one day, if you're lucky, you'll find yourself exactly where you always belonged, with your feet planted in your own patch of ground, the world at peace around you, and the knowledge that you were part of making it so. And if you ever do wander by this old lake, don't be a stranger. The gate's open, the grill's hot, and there's always room at the table for another neighbor, story and all. Maybe it's an old man's habit, or maybe just the luxury of a life hard-fought and finally unhurried. But sometimes I find myself writing letters I never planned to send. Little reminders for myself or whoever comes next, folded into the back of that battered folder alongside the deed and the old court papers. Maybe, someday, someone will find them and understand not just what happened, but why it mattered. So here's one for the future. Call it a letter to the next homeowner, or maybe to anyone standing on the edge, wondering if it's worth the trouble to hold your ground. Dear future keeper, if you're reading this, you're holding more than a set of keys. You're holding the story of this place. The laughter, the sleepless nights, the victories won over coffee and stubbornness. You're inheriting fences built from more than wood and wire, a piece that was argued into being and held together by neighbors who learned, the hard way, that rights are only as strong as the people willing to defend them. There will be days when the world feels heavy, when it's easier to look the other way, to give up your claim just to keep things quiet. Don't. Stand. Trust your gut, and trust the people who show up when things get tough. Not everyone will, but the ones who do, those are your real neighbors. Your chosen family. Take care of the land. Walk at its sunrise. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Remember what it costs to keep these lines honest. Help a neighbor. Accept help when it's offered. And let forgiveness outlast the old grudges. If a storm comes, be it wind or rumor, or some new self-declared authority, anchor yourself in truth, not fear. The rules you set matter less than the respect you show. No sign, no law, no court order can replace the strength of simple decency, of showing up, listening, laughing, and letting things go when the time comes. Don't worry about being perfect. Just be present. And if trouble ever comes knocking, clipboard in hand or otherwise, remember this. You are not alone. You have a voice, a history, and a circle of good people who know how to stand side by side. That's what turned this house into a home, and this neighborhood into something better than any rulebook could promise. So open your windows wide. Let the kids run wild. Hang your lights. Plant your flowers. Swim in the pool with joy. Celebrate the victories, small and large. Keep the story alive and add your own chapter, because this piece is not a museum piece. It's a living thing, kept bright by every act of kindness and courage, day after day. I'll leave the porch light on, in case you ever need to find your way home. Welcome. CM. Sometimes I tuck that letter under the old deed and forget about it for a while, certain in my bones that this is what real belonging feels like. Not a victory parade, not a headline, but a slow, steady unfolding of trust. A place where stories outlive their tellers, where the porch lights glow long after the arguments fade. Years from now, when my time here is just another memory etched into the grain of the floorboards and the roots of the oaks, I hope whoever reads this finds it not as a warning, but as an invitation to fight, to forgive, to keep the peace alive in their own way. Because that's the real legacy, not the sign on the gate or the line on a survey, but the laughter in the yard, the smell of charcoal and rain, the feeling on a quiet night with the wind in the trees that you are right where you're supposed to be. And if you ever need a sign that it's worth it, just look around. You'll see it in every handshake, every wave, every story that keeps this place alive.